Today we will discuss the second part of economic survey. In the first video, as you remember, we had discussed the first volume, the strategy of the growth and development which government had outlined. Today, in the second volume, we will look at the performance of economy. Because this is a very voluminous book, we can't go into the details of it. So we have picked up some interesting facts and patterns that we discuss. So let's now look at economic survey, second volume. First, we'll have a general review of performance of economy. In last 4-5 years from 2014-15, growth momentum is not stable. It is slightly disturbing. This year, the year which has just ended, growth rate cooled down to 6.8% of GDP. Last year it was 7.2% and previous to that it was 8.2%. So gradually the growth rate is declining and the survey projects that next year it is likely to be 7%. Relating to GDP growth rate, there is a concept GVA growth rate, gross value addition growth rate. If you look at the GVA growth rate, last year it was 6.6%. Previous to that, it was 6.9%. And before that, it was 7.9%. In this context, the difference we understand that GVA is gross value addition, and if we add net indirect taxes, we get GDP, broadly speaking. From last year, 17-18 to 18-19, growth rate of GDP has declined by 0.4%, but growth rate of GVA has declined only by 0.3%. To understand that, we need there is a fact that tax collection, net indirect tax collection has improved better. So the gap has narrowed from 4% gap, 0.4% to 0.3%. In 16-17 also the gap was 0.3%. Now the gap has widened to 0.4%. This is also a point of concern. Gradual slowdown in the growth momentum is perfectly in line with the global pattern. The global GDP growth rate is also declining last year to this year. The major economies of the world, China's growth rate is declining, European growth rate is declining. So along with that, our Indian economy's growth rate is also declining. In the same period, if you look at gross domestic saving, that is the percentage of income Indians save on an average, in 14-15, it was 32.2%. But next year in 15-16, it declined to 31.3%. If saving of a society declines, it may be a result of either decline in per capita income or a result of increase in consumption habit or increase in general price level. So we know that during this period price level declined, inflation rate declined, and in spite of decline in inflation rate, GDS also declines is a kind of a fact which we need to closely look at. In 16-17, gross domestic saving declined further to 30.3% of GDP or income. Next year, 17-18, it improved slightly to 30.5%. For 18-19, the fact in survey is not available, but it is likely to be somewhere around the same. Survey says that our GDS is declining partly because physical saving is declining. In this context, we know that saving is of two kinds, physical saving and financial savings. Physical saving has declined sharply, financial saving has somewhat improved. That is the statement given in survey. Money saved and invested in real estate properties like that is in purchase of piece of land or flat, or money saved and invested in purchase of jewelry and gold, bullion, are called physical saving. Money saved and kept in bank in recurring account or saving account or fixed account, or money saved and invested in mutual funds, bonds, share market, are considered financial saving. So financial saving has improved, that is more fund has gone to mutual funds, more fund has gone into share market, but physical saving has reduced more than that. So aggregate saving, GDS, has declined. This decline in GDS indicates that our investment capacity is declining. And if we have a target of $5 trillion GDP to be achieved by 2014, 24, 25, we need to increase investment. That is what we had discussed in the first volume. And to be able to increase investment, we need to save more and also bring in more fund from foreign countries. But if we are able to attract more foreign capital, and at the same time our domestic saving is declining, then the aggregate impact investment is less pronounced, less powerful. So the point of concern is that GDP growth rate is declining, GVA growth rate is also declining, GDS as a percentage of GDP is declining, and all these are indicating that $5 trillion GDP target is going to be a tough target, more challenging. So we'll have to think out the solutions. If you look at other things, we also see current account deficit, which is broadly the net amount of foreign currency which we earn through export. So gross value of export minus gross value of import, including both goods and services, gives us the value of current account deficit. Current account deficit in 15-16 was 1.1% of GDP, which was quite a comfortable level, very comfortably manageable. In 16-17, it was minus 0.6. That means we had in fact current account surplus, as a survey suggests. No, it was not minus, it was deficit only. So, but deficit reduced 1.1% to 0.6%. But in 17-18, it increased sharply from 0.6% of GDP to 1.9% of GDP. And in 18-19, it increased further to 2.6% of GDP. And this increase in current account deficit is on account of less growth in exports, less growth in imports of both goods and services. So our goods export growth rate has reduced in 18-19 compared to 17-18. Our service growth rate has also reduced. Our goods import growth rate has reduced. Our import growth rate of services are also reduced. That means the foreign trade to GDP ratio is not as powerful today as it used to be earlier. So our integration with global economy is also measured by looking at share of export and import to GDP. So if GDP is growing but exports and imports are not growing proportionately, that means we are not as closely linked to world economy today as we used to be a couple of years ago. So this could be good, because if there are some headwinds or some negative trends in world economy and we are not linked as powerfully as earlier, will be less adversely affected, will be immunized from global adverse events. But if there is some good growth momentum in the world economy, will also be deprived of the benefits of that global development. So general review through growth and through savings and through foreign trade is this. In this context, some basic things which many of you know perhaps, that survey has used GVA as such, and there is a core GVA. So they say that if we deduct value of agricultural and allied goods from GVA, and also we deduct public administration and defense services from GVA, gross value addition, we get core GVA. So survey says that though our GVA growth rate has moderated, but our core GVA growth rate has improved. That means most of the moderation in GVA is on account of moderation in agricultural growth rate and moderation in public administration and defense sector growth rate. So this is a kind of face-saving statement, but anyways, naturally, as our current account deficit has increased rather, so we have earned less money. So as a result of that, exchange rate of rupee has also weakened from approximately 63, 64 rupees 17, 18 to now on an average 68 rupees. Our tax GDP ratio has also reduced, though net indirect tax collection has increased. But if you add all kinds of taxes and look at the amount of taxes with respect to GDP, the ratio has reduced from 11.2% earlier in 17-18 to now 10.9%. Tax GDP ratio is taken to understand buoyancy of budget. So our budget buoyancy is not as powerful as earlier. Our foreign currency earning is not as powerful. Our balance of payment position is also a little weakened. Our growth momentum has weakened. Saving habit has also a little bit weakened. So this is a general overview. Economy is not in a perfectly healthy condition. So there are challenges. Survey has identified the challenges. Government will have to work lots of on front, and we have to devise many measures to implement efficiently so as to bring about more momentum in the economy. Next we look at specific sectors. So first of all, we look at agriculture, and not a general review of agriculture but some highlighted facts in the survey which could be important from examination point of view. So one thing in agriculture is that government is implementing nowadays two programs. One is called Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. And the second is called Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. Interesting facts are given with respect to Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. Paramparagat means traditional. So government is trying to promote traditional methods of cultivation of crops, and there are 5 different models mentioned in survey for Paramparagat Krishi. One is called natural farming. And natural farming survey has defined as that method of cultivation in which no chemicals are used. Cultivation without chemicals is called natural farming. The second form or method of traditional cultivation is called here zero budget natural farming. Survey defines that zero budget natural farming is that method of farming in which no inputs are purchased from market. No inputs, particularly seeds, fertilizers, and insecticides are purchased from market. So no money is spent to buy these things. The crops which were cultivated by a farmer last year, part of that crop is used for next cultivation and fertilizer of natural manures, etc. are used. And this way, some natural things has pesticides also. The third method of traditional or paramparagat krishi is called Vedic farming. Fourth is called cow farming. And there is a fifth mentioned, that is home farming. It may not be pronounced as homa farming, it's simply home. Home means a kind of sacrifice which was practiced in Vedic times. People burn some kinds of goods which create fumes, and that could be healthy for environment and having healing effect. So this is one interesting thing that some surveys described, that this kind of cultivation is being promoted. These are all indigenous forms of what you call organic farming. The second thing of our agriculture is that, and that's a point of concern, that our research and development effort in agriculture is disappointing. Agricultural research and development, R&D, investment expenditure has been mentioned in 2012-13. We used to have 0.3% of agricultural GDP on R&D. In 16-17, the situation did not change much. It was 0.36% of agricultural GDP is spent on agricultural research and development. In 17-18, situation has deteriorated. It is only 0.32% of agricultural GDP. In 18-19, this is 0.37% of agricultural GDP. But we have to look at the riddle of the variation in fact. In 17-18, agricultural GDP had increased. Agriculture experienced high growth rate. So because the value of agricultural GDP was high, money is spent on research and development appeared, proportionate money appeared to be reduced. But the actual expenditure had not reduced, proportional value reduced. Last year, 18-19, agricultural growth rate has become negative. So agricultural GDP value has reduced, base has reduced. So the money spent on R&D has appeared to be improving, but the actual expenditure is not improving proportionately. This is important. And third thing, that survey advocates to promote composite farming. And government is doing it. That means farmers, crop cultivators are being encouraged and being helped to not only cultivate crops but also engaged in livestock management, animal rearing, and that is called composite farming. The next thing which is interesting and distinguishable from examination point of view is about milk production or milk related facts, milk economy you can say. Facts are that India is the biggest producer since 2001. In the world. Second is that India produces 20% share of India in world milk production. Is 20%. Third important interesting fact is that from 91-92, and that's very important, in 91-92, milk production was in India 55.6 million tons. Before liberalization was adopted, or just the year when liberalization policy was adopted, 55.6. But recently in 2018-19, milk production in India has gone up to 176.3 million tons. So liberalization and its impact on milk production has been very powerful. India has become biggest producer. Average annual growth rate during this period has been 4.5%, very consistently, while agriculture has not shown a consistent growth rate of 4.5%, it is less than 2%. Bulk milk production has shown a very consistent growth of 4.5%. Per capita availability. Per capita availability of milk in India is 375 grams per day. But there is a regional variation. That regional variation is also very noteworthy fact. The lowest per capita availability is only 71 grams per day in Assam. So milk production has not taken a very strong root in Assam and the surrounding region, and the highest per capita availability is in Punjab, and that is 1120 grams per day. So generally Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, this area is having more popularly adopted, farmers adopted popularly the animal rearing profession. Dairy farming is also growing, private sector participation is also growing, cooperative farming is growing. But in east and northeastern part, we need to take some extra efforts so as to make animal rearing more acceptable form of profession, that is composite farming. Next thing about agriculture is only that agriculture is important not for farmers but also for consumers. So from the perspective of food security, there are certain facts important in survey. One is that there is a global food security index. Which uses 3-4 dimensions: affordability, availability, quality and safety, and resource, natural resource. And resilience. These 4 parameters are used to produce or calculate global food security index. India is having a score of 50 out of 100, 50%, and rank is score is 50.1. Rank of India is 76 out of 113 countries. So this is not very proud fact for India. 2 things which are interesting is in this context that here again R&D is used. So in agricultural R&D, Indian score is 0. This is so small expenditure on R&D that the score is 0. But on nutrition standard, Indian score is 100, which is highest. So on R&D we have scored lowest, and in nutritional standard we have scored highest. So we could be proud about that. Then the last thing about agriculture is that government wants the farmers to have more income. So doubling farmers' income, DFI strategy. How to double farmers' income, DFI. An interministerial committee was constituted and some measures were invited from them. They have mentioned 7 measures. So one is improvement in crop productivity, another is improvement in livestock productivity, third is resource use efficiency, that is saving of cost, fourth is increase in cropping intensity, Fifth is diversification of towards high value crops. Sixth is improvement in real prices received by farmers. And seventh is shift from farm to non-farm occupations. In agriculture only, the next important and interesting thing is about fisheries sector. As you know, India is second largest producer of fish in the world, as well as second largest exporter. Total production 13.7 million metric tons, and fish sector contributes 5.23% in agricultural GDP. Fish sector or fishery sector also makes contribution in exports. As we mentioned that we are one of the biggest exporters of fish. So in 1819, the export value was rupees 47,620 crores. Now these figures are important because this is a very labor intensive sector. That means from the world economy, this much money has flowed into Indian economy, and this has gone to a very large number of farmers who are generally poor farmers or lower middle income class farmers. So if we promote fishing sector, it will not only add to growth momentum, but it will also make the growth process more and more inclusive. It will reduce directly the incidence of poverty in our society, and of course, it will also have impact on quality of food security. Now we turn to industry sector. As you know, to understand the performance of industry, we look at Index of Industrial Production, IIP. Index of Industrial Production classifies all the industrial institutions in two different ways. So classification one is that is called sectoral classification. All the industrial institutions are classified into broadly three sectors: mining sector, manufacturing sector, and electricity, gas, and water sector, or simply called electricity sector. And there is another classification, classification number 2, that is use based classification. So the details you can look at there. But if you look at the sectoral class weight, mining sector makes a contribution of 14.4% in IIP. Manufacturing sectors has a contribution of 77.6%, and electricity, water, gas sector, etc. has got contribution of 8%. So 92 plus 8, 100%. Now, if you look at growth rate in last couple of years, 17-18 and then 18-19, so understand whether growth momentum has been picking up or reducing. In 17-18, growth rate was 2.3%. This year, survey claims that growth rate has improved to 2.9%. So this is an improvement. This is good, happy news. In manufacturing sector, last year growth rate was 4.6%, but this year it is 3.6%. 3.6% is 1% down. This is a point of concern. Electricity sector, last year growth rate was 5.4%. This year it is moderately reduced to 5.2%. So 2 out of 3 sectors of industries have slowed down, and this has contributed to slowing down of GDP growth rate. So growth rate GDP has slowed down partly on account of slowdown in agriculture sector and partly on account of growth rate in industrial sector. And next we'll also see that service sector growth rate also moderated, that is reduced this year as compared to last year. Among industrial institutions, some industries are called core industries. And they're also called infrastructure industries. So, core and infrastructure industries. So, first thing you need to know which industries are called core and infrastructure industries. So, that is coal industry, cement industry, iron and steel industry. Then we have power industry. Then crude petroleum industry. And petroleum refinery also. Refining industry. These six have been granted the status of core infrastructure for quite long time, right from point of independence. But two industries have been added since 2009. One is fertilizer industry, and the other is natural gas industry. So these 8 core industries have also shown somewhat mixed performance. Fertilizer industry has shown negative growth rate this year in 18-19, and power industry is also slowed down very close to 0%, and other industries also growth rate is slowed down compared to last year. Then the next thing to understand about industry is that how our public sector enterprises have performed. Central government has enterprises, state government also have enterprises, CPSEs, Central Public Sector Enterprises. Survey informs us that we have overall 339 CPSEs, public sector enterprises, after which 257 are operational and others are defunct, not operational. So the issue is that should the government try to revive these enterprises, or should the government sell them out or close them altogether and lay off all the workers? This is contentious issue. Among the operational ones, 257, 184 are profit making enterprises. 17 are loss-making enterprises, and 2 are running on no profit, no loss. If you look at the value of profit in 17-18, the figures for 18-19 are not available. In 17-18, the aggregate profit of this 184 profit-making industries was 1,59,635 crores rupees. And the loss-making enterprise had a combined loss of 31,261 crores. And they are of course zero. So the net profit, if you reduce the losses from the aggregate profit, was 1,28,374 crores. Which is very small, which is 2.9% of capital invested. So the profitability, rate of profit is not very impressive. But the point is that these PSCs don't only contribute in the economic performance of India, they have some major social contributions also. They produce certain things which private companies not prefer to produce. So the issue is that should we disinvest all of them, privatize all of them? This is a contentious issue, looking at their performance and contributions so far. And there are certain interesting facts about textile industries also, social relevance. Fact number 1 is that it is the second biggest producer and exporter in the world. Just from exemption point of view, this fact is interesting. Indian textile industry is second biggest textile industry in the world. And Indian textile export is second biggest export in the world. Next is that it contributes roughly 13%, 12.7% in manufacturing GDP, and it contributes 2.3%, 35% in GDP. If you look at entire GDP, 2.3%. If you look at only manufacturing part of GDP, 12.7%. And share of India in global export, global trade, share of Indian textile export in global export is 5%. And this is a very big employer. It is second biggest employer after agriculture sectors. But the problematic point is that last year textile sector has recorded negative growth rate. So textile sector is in problems in spite of its contribution in GDP and its contribution in export and contribution in society in terms of employment. And the last thing we'll look at is about service sectors. Service sector, you know, has a share of roughly 54% in GDP. And it has roughly 32% share in total employment. So service sector is useful for India from its perspective of contribution in, this is exactly 54, 34. Total employment 34%, total production 54% share. And Indian service sector is very powerful in the global scenario. India is 8th biggest exporter of commercial services, 8th biggest exporter of services in the world. So if we have current account deficit and we want to contain that growing problem, we need to promote service export. We are having competencies, and our society is also having preference for Indian young persons, rather than studying that art of engineering which requires them to engage in industrial sector, prefer to study computer science and electronics, etc., which takes them to service sector. So social preference is powerful for services, and we have other capabilities for services, and our share in world service growth is also good. If we look at share, percentage share of Indian service export in world service export is 3.5%. This fact is important because if you look at the world goods export, our share is only 1.8%. But in world service export, our share is almost double, 3.5%. So that means, that shows that we are relatively more competent, more efficient in services compared to Chinese services and other countries' services. So we could take advantage of our core competencies. That the strategy should be there, that if we want to encourage investment, rather, of course, we can encourage investment in agriculture and other occupations related to agriculture, industry also. But of course, we should have a clear preference for services, because its utility, usefulness for employment, its usefulness in GDP, usefulness in foreign currency earning. Export growth rate of commercial services in the world last year was 7.7%, and our growth rate was 10.77%. Growth rate of service export. (10.7% for India and 7.7% for the world. That means our service export growth rate is going faster than the average of the world. But Chinese have exported services even faster than us. They have their service export to the world last year was increased by 17%. So we are having a direct competition with Chinese companies, and we need to encourage and support our companies which are engaged in service production. And a variety of new services are emerging, particularly this new technology-based services, Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, etc. So this is what are the highlights. In our limited time, we have tried to underline those facts we need to take notice of, but other parts of survey are also having very important, interesting facts. To know the details of that, I advise you to read survey yourself. Thank you.